Veterans, the president is going to be giving away your hard-earned tax dollars to another country unless you file your VA claim right now. We're going to talk about why you need to do it and how to do it in this video, as well as all the things I messed up, so let's dig in. There's four main reasons that you should file for VA disability. The very first is compensation for service-connected disabilities, right? Inevitably, you guys know that you can get paid from the government for this as compensation, right? And everybody's like, wow, that's amazing. It's the best passive income ever. And like, yeah, but also, you know, you wear a hearing aid for the rest of your life. Your knee doesn't work. You're stuck sleeping next to a CPAP, or you've got like whatever the disability is, right? Like I've got friends that lost a limb. I've got friends that are blind. I've got friends that are deaf. I have a friend who's both, and by the way, is more badass than all of us. But like, those are things that you lost while serving, and you should be. I'm all for compensating people for things like that. You're also going to get access to that VA healthcare. If you get to 100% permanent total, it's free medical, dental for you and your family, which is incredible. Like your wife, son, daughter, husband, whatever, dependents. That's incredible. Not only does that save you a ton of money every month, but it's also taking care of your family, which is exactly why a lot of us served in the first place. So definitely take advantage of it for that reason. But the other thing is, even if you don't get to 100% permanent in total, everything you document is now covered by the VA. So if your, leg got blown off, would you rather pay to go see somebody every time there's an issue, or like have it covered? I'd rather have it covered. So, easy. Every time my hearing aid batteries go out, I don't have to pay for them. That's awesome. This also allows you to protect your future, because what you document today may not all get a rating, and it may not even be an issue. But there are issues that might come down the road 30, 40 years from now that you're not aware of, or seemed like a non-issue and just got progressively worse. And there's nothing worse than having something like that come up and you're not taken care of for it, or you're trying to document 40 years back when you probably lost all the paperwork. Nightmare. And so, documenting everything right now is crucial, because what if something is a secondary to that? Meaning, let's say, all right, here you go. I got blown up in 2010, drove over an IED in Afghanistan, and from that, I got a small TBI, right? A little traumatic brain injury, no big deal. I was fine, right? I was fine, no PTSD. Had PTSD, but I made it work. I was in service for another 11 years after that, and I was fine. When I got out, some of those issues flared up, and I didn't know about that, and that was whatever. But for example, a year later, my testosterone went whoop, and apparently that's related to TBI, so it is covered. My testosterone replacement therapy can be covered by the VA for that issue as a secondary. But if I hadn't documented the TBI, the IED, the PTSD, like the stuff, then that probably wouldn't be, and I'd be coming out of pocket to pay for testosterone. So there's an easy win. But there are things that are gonna come up over the next, decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, right? I was in the stir the poop generation and lungs and all that. So who knows what may come up from all the lung issues down the road? I don't know. What if I get lung cancer? I'd rather have the VA take care of me than have to come out of pocket hundreds of thousands of dollars for that. There's also the benefits for your family. If you get to 100% PNT, they get medical, they get college grants, there's property tax waives, there's also the income coming in from it. There's a lot of benefits from your family. So all great reasons to file for your VA claim. Now we're going to talk about how to file. And this really isn't as complicated as some might seem. Now, I will preface this by saying I'm talking about how to file post-service, right? I'm not talking about that 180-day window where you're filing your initial claim. I'm talking about going back to file for updates or what they missed or whatever. And for reference, right, when I got out, I got 80%, but they didn't service connect my hearing aid, because even though I had all the documentation in showing what my hearing was at, that I got a hearing aid while serving, the IED and the combat action ribbon associated with the IED, they messed up in the system and they were not service connected. And I was able to go back and fight that. They were oops, our bad, and they overturned it, right? So things like that. Things like my CPAP wasn't initially service connected, then there was stuff in my medical record that did service connect it, so that got added in. I wasn't honest about some of the mental health stuff, right? Because let's be real, a lot of us have that pride or ego while serving, and we're not gonna go and say we're struggling with things. And even on top of that, some of that stuff doesn't flare until you leave the military and you're in a totally different environment, and now things you didn't think were an issue might be, or they get worse, or, so admittedly, I didn't bring up a lot of that stuff. And then down the road, I was like, oh, shoot, like, yeah, this is an issue. It actually took a psychiatrist who was willing to sit down with me and go, no, before you answer that question, this is what it would look like in your daily life. And I'm like, oh, I've been saying no for years, but I do have exactly that. Like, that happens all the time. And they're like, yeah, well, put yes. I'm like, oh, okay. So having someone who really cared explain all that to me. So what you're gonna wanna do now is first step is go gather all your documentation. So that might be your electronic record from service. That'll be any VA appointments, any primary care appointments, anything you paid out of pocket for because like maybe when you were serving, you didn't want the military to see access to those records. I don't know anyone who's ever done that. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But like pull all of those records together, right? So gather everything. Then you're gonna file your claim. You're just gonna go to va.gov, you're gonna fill out, I'm looking at the numbers over here. It's a VA form 21-526EZ, which is a form that allows you to fill out, there's guides online how to do it, but like exactly what's bothering you, what you're filing for an adjustment on for your claim, and submit it. At which point, come to step 3, which is be as detailed as humanly possible. Like, you want to be honest with them, not optimistic and happy and tough. And this is actually something I struggled with one of my appointments is like, they're like, well, say you're struggling with, sleep, insomnia, PTSD, depression, anxiety, like whatever, right? Whatever the thing was. But when you come in the office, you're like, oh yeah, I'm doing great. Life's good. Woo. And that doesn't compute. Like, be honest with the provider that's doing your CMP exam, your compensation and, what is it called? Your compensation and pension plan, CMP exam. Because that's the person who's writing notes. And if you're like living a totally different life in private than what you tell them about, all they know is what you tell them about. They don't know about all this. So like be honest and be vulnerable and be detailed. So if you're like, I'm trying to use myself as an example here as much as possible, right? Sometimes in my sleep I snore, that's gonna be taken one way for CPAP. But if I'm like, hey, in this year, on this date, this was documented, I got tested, they said I was within standards, then I got tested again, they said I wasn't within standards, they gave me a CPAP, I snore like the Dickens, and I have like apneic episodes 16 times a minute, which means 16 times a minute I stop breathing for at least a few seconds, and that's no bueno. But if I didn't have details and document that and like write it out, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't sleep well, and my ex says I snore, like, that doesn't help anyone. They're like, okay, what does that mean? Everybody snores, right? Or a lot of people snore, but like, no, this is legit, like what's going on. So step 4, they'll schedule your CMP exam. That's that compensation and pension exam. Those are gonna be, it could be one, it could be multiple. It might even, in my case, it was like I went to the same or different people for the same thing like 2 or 3 times. And so it can be kind of a pain, but they will compensate you for your mileage, and which is like, a couple bucks. It's nothing crazy, but like they will, like, you won't be paying for anything to get this done. And you're gonna go and you're gonna be as honest with them as possible, and you're gonna show documentation, and that is where you're gonna make your case for like, no, this actually affects my life. Like, this is why it affects my work, my home life, my sleep, my quality of life, my time with my kids, whatever. And you may even discover things in that process that you didn't know were issues. So here's a really interesting example, right? I was talking with someone about this, and, I was like, well, they're like, well, do you have any issues playing with your kids? I was like, well, I can't sit on the floor. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, like if I sit on the floor, on my butt, Indian style, like cross-legged or legs out or whatever, like within a minute, my legs are just asleep. They're just pins and needles tingling out. And I'm like, I can't, my kid knows, like I have to sit on the couch, I have to sit at the kitchen table. Like I can't get on the floor and play board games with him. And the guy's like, oh, well, that's called radiculopathy. It's related to your lumbosacral strain, like your back issues from when you got blown up. I'm like, oh, I just assumed that was like normal. And he's like, no, not at all. I'm like, okay. I'm like, wait, so like when your stuff goes to sleep faster than it should, like that's this? He's like, uh-huh. I was like, oh. And so I asked him the question. I was like, hey, if I'm like sitting, call it like a church pew, and I put my arms up on the pew, like this arm, almost within 30 seconds, like almost immediately, asleep, dead, pins and needles, tingly, like out cold. Like there are days I wake up and this one's just done. Even if I'm like sitting on my phone, like sitting up in my phone in my bed, I'm not like sleeping on it. This one, like it's just weird. But I'm like, it's only like if I put my arms up like this, it's like guaranteed less than a minute. This one's out, this one's fine. And the example I gave him was like, if I'm sitting next to my, well now ex, but my wife at in a chair or whatever, I can put this arm around her and sit there for a long time. I can't put this arm around her because it goes to sleep almost immediately. And I was like, I don't know if that's really a radiculopathy. So they sent me through all these different things. I got a rating for it. Turns out, and this is probably IED related, who knows, the C, I think it's like C5, C6, maybe C7, I don't know. I have a pinched nerve in one of my vertebrae that runs all the way through. And so there are certain positions with my arm that just, everything goes to sleep. And that is just, will always be, unless I get this neck surgery, which is it's not a big enough issue for me to justify someone going in and screwing with my vertebrae. So, but I had no idea. So like, just be honest about all these things, because you don't know what you don't know. Like, don't self-diagnose, because I would have just been like, that's normal. Not normal. Turns out it was a big thing. And then step 5 here is follow up. You are going to have to follow up on what the VA is saying, follow up on paperwork. You may have to refile 2 or 3 times. It may be a little bit disheartening, but it's worth it to get the rating you deserve. And there's back pay associated. And if you get to 100% PNT, I did a video on some of the best benefits for that. But like, there's a ton of great benefits for that. But even if you don't get to 100, if you get bumped from like 60 to 80, that's a little bit of extra compensation. But more importantly, those medical issues will forever be taken care of by the VA, which is huge. So understand, this process may not be fun, but it's going to be worth it in the end. Now, here's a couple pro tips, right? Start early. The sooner after you discharge from the military, the better. And for 2 main reasons. One, it's a lot easier to find paperwork, gather documentation, and remember everything that went down if you're like fresh out and have everything, than if you're like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road and you're like, I don't know, it got lost. The other piece is there's a window, and I always mess this up. I think it's 6 months. It might be a year, but I think it's like 6 months. Anything after you separate from the military that you document or mention within that window can and will be associated with service connection, even if you didn't really know about it at the time. So if you wait 10 years to file and you're like, I had all these things I didn't realize, you might be screwed unless they have a secondary tie-in to something you already have a claim on. But if you bring it up right away, like as soon as possible, you're like, oh shoot, I didn't know about this. Then even if it doesn't have a secondary, you have a chance of getting it added back in your record and getting compensated for it and having it added to your disability rating, which is huge. So sooner the better. All right, the second pro tip here is to get help. And I am not one to say like, go hunt down those like slimy lawyer people or whatever companies like guarantee 100 PNT, or they take a percentage of your, whatever they get you in back pay or whatever. I've got a good friend who does this for a living. I don't get anything out of dropping his name. He's one of my favorite people. I hiked Machu Picchu with him a few years back. We did like a 56-mile, 5-day trek to Machu Picchu, hiked up the mountain, hiked back, did like the sketchiest bus ride ever back, and then went to Colombia for a week. And he is just an incredible human, one of my best friends. And so, I'll drop his contact info in the video description. And if for whatever reason I forget to do that, please just comment down below and I'll shoot it over to you. He's a retired naval officer, and he'll just tell you up front. He'll be like, yeah, I can help you, or no, I can't. And if I do help you, it'll be this flat fee for getting you across the line, but you don't pay until it's done. So it's, no skin off your back if it doesn't work, but it will, because he's amazing, and then he'll help you out. So I would do that. I think if I didn't know that's what he did when I filed all this mess, and it cost me a lot of time, probably a year messing with all this, when if I had gone through him, I've recommended a couple people to him and they've all got started and finished faster than I did. In fact, most of them finished before I finished, even though I started way before them. So he's amazing. But yeah, find somebody. It doesn't have to be him, but find somebody to help you in this process. The third thing I would say is just don't give up. It is very possible and very common for your rating to come in lower than you think it should be, or for the VA to disagree with you on a service connection, or to disagree with you on a standard that they think it meets or doesn't meet, or for them to just mess paperwork up. Like I told you guys, I have a hearing aid. I'm not wearing it right now, but I have a hearing aid that was provided to me while serving after an IED blast and an injury sustained in combat. I had all the documentation, like my ear, the minimum threshold for any 1 decibel, my entire left ear averages below that. So like If one tone was below the threshold that my entire hearing range is, I would be qualified per the standard for VA disability. So I met that, check the box. And then I have a combat action certificate stating why I got my combat action certificate, which is IED, showing service connection. Hey, I was in a really loud boom boom. Not to mention I was a truck driver, I was around a lot heavy equipment, and I was, around machine guns and ranges and all the things throughout service, but I drove over a bomb and that connects it. And then right below acknowledging the service connection with this combat action ribbon citation uploaded, they said, decision not service connected. And I was like, what the heck? And it took me probably like 2 or 3 weeks to get a hold of VA. And essentially once I did and I submitted, it was like WTF. They were like, oh shoot, we made an error. I think they sent me a paper that said, I should find it, but I think it said egregious error. I don't know. Basically they sent me a paper that was like, our bad, we screwed up. This is an absolute error. Fixed immediately, like whatever. That was done, I got that right away and was beginning to get covered for that. But like, they're gonna mess stuff up. This is government employees. They're not always the best of the best. They're not always the best processes and they're not always the fastest, but they're there to help you. And the doctors are there to help you. So like, be as open about all this stuff as you can, get help, be persistent. It will help you take care of yourself for the rest of your life. And then depending on your rating, it waives all kinds of things like the funding fee for your VA loan, which is incredible, but it also brings a bunch of other benefits. So, you get the compensation plus all these other benefits. And again, it's just to help, essentially make up for the sacrifices you made serving this country. And you deserve to be compensated for injuries that you sustained. And again, I just want to say this for everybody, because I'm sure that the comment thread will be, people hating on anyone who's admin and got disabled, and people who are admin saying, oh, only infantry shit. Like, I am not about that. I don't care, especially in the Marine Corps. Like, you could be a cook and have a Purple Heart because of where you were attached to and where you served. Like, doesn't matter to me. I don't have a dog in that fight. The dog in the fight that I have is just be honest. If you didn't sustain a bunch of injuries, then don't go claim a bunch of crap and fraud your way into it, because that could potentially start ruining the benefit for everybody else. But also, be honest. If you did sustain a bunch of crap, don't keep your mouth shut because of your pride or ego. Like, if nothing else, think of the other people in your life that this could be beneficially impactful for, and file your claim. Filing your VA disability claim isn't selfish, it's your right. And you deserve to be taken care of for everything you gave in service of our country. And anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. I'd love to help you out along your financial journey. For anyone who's new to this channel, I'm Dave, Military Millionaire Online. We help service members and vets achieve financial freedom through real estate investing, entrepreneurship, personal finance. We are the king of VA loans and house hacking and education on that, as well as military communities for investors and everything from buying businesses and whatever. So I'd love to help you with all your financial questions and needs and dig into our free content and help yourself. Grab a free copy of my book over on the website, or I'll drop a link down below and you can grab a copy there. And if you found this video helpful, share it with somebody that can benefit from the information. Drop a like, maybe drop a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I love you all. Have a great day.